The
All right,
camera.
we are ready. Can I have a motion to reconvene?
I move to reconvene into open session. I second that.
All right, roll call vote. Michelle?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Philip? Eric? Peter?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, can I have a motion can I have a motion? D1?
Oh, right. I move approval of the addendum to curriculum coordinator contract for Emily Kinstner as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Rochelle?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Eric? Peter?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, order of business. There are no public appearances today. All right, can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Move the consent agenda is presented.
Second.
Roll call vote. Rochelle?
Aye.
Susan? Elizabeth?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next are recognitions.
Okay. Last week, we celebrated Wisconsin School Board Week. Thank you to each board member for everything you do for our students and school community. Without your dedication, our district would not be what it is today. Last month, we came together to remember Charlie Ping, high school art teacher and tennis coach, on the first anniversary of his passing. On September 15th, high school students continued the tradition they began last year by wearing pink in his memory. The girls' tennis team also wore pink at their home match as a tribute to their coach. We're incredibly proud of our students for the way they honored the memory of Mr. Ping. We'd like to recognize Janice Stone, who was inaugurated into the UW Marching Band Hall of Fame in September. Janice served the district for 30 years as a band director and retired last year. She is now back as a long-term sub. In her time as a student at UW-Madison, she was the first female Sousa player in the UW Marching Band. Congratulations to Janice. September 15th through October 15th is National Hispanic Latina Heritage Month. Our students participated in a variety of lessons and activities to learn more about the achievements, culture, and heritage of Hispanic and Latinx Americans. One big project was done by our middle school students who each colored a flag that will be part of a large mural. And last week, we celebrated a walk and bike to school day. Many students and families joined in participation. As students arrived, they were welcomed with exciting outdoor activities, including small crafts, a morning snack, and a warm greeting from local first responders. It was an engaging start to the day, fostering a strong sense of community and healthy habits among our students. Thanks to our staff and community who helped make this happen.
Susan?
I just wanted to add, because I was telling Dan about this, and it just, again, for Krishna, it shows you what you can do if you just say, I'm going to try and do it. A neighbor of ours who graduated this year, Dylan O'Brien, from Monona Grove High School, tried out for the University of Wisconsin Marching Band, which is a very challenging place to be, and he's in mechanical engineering. And he made the band and got to march in homecoming and the homecoming parade. And so, I mean, it's just really fun to know, lives just down the street.
Oh, yeah. As a member of band, I met with him multiple times. We did Skills USA together, so I'm really proud to hear that.
It's just fun to know that can happen because it's so incredibly competitive, you know.
Thanks for sharing, Susan. All right, no correspondence and announcements. Administrative reports. Joe Schreiner.
All right. Well, so I'm Joe Schneider. I'm the Associate Principal and Activities Director at Monona Grove High School, hired in July of 21, and you all have the privilege of listening to me ramble about athletics and activities here for maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Favorite time of year.
There you go. So I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the foundational grounding work that we did in 2021. I had the opportunity to meet with some of our student athlete leaders and really, coming out of the pandemic, reflect and establish what exactly is our purpose, what are our values, and what are our traits as Silver Eagle athletes. And this was 100% come up by the students, what they wanted. We did a few meetings on it, and this is where we landed. And they believe the intent or the purpose of our programs is to create community unity and bring people together, which is super powerful coming from a group of high school kids. They believe that the values Silver Eagles should display are accountability, teamwork, and respect, and the traits should be pride, competitive, and respectful. And they really hung on to that respect piece, which I also think is really powerful coming from high school students, especially in education-based athletics, especially if you look at the news recently as far as everything that's going on with education-based athletics and really youth athletics as a whole. So that's some of our grounding work that we did in 2021, which brings you to why I'm here and why I do what I do. I serve to bring people together to inspire discipline and integrity for the improvement of society as a whole. I believe I have a small piece in that with activities in athletics. I'm looking to improve society. And that's why I do what I do. And I was able to land on that from the Inside Out Coaching Initiative, which started in 22-23, which was an experience provided by the WIAA. They are still going through that work right now. The intent of that work is essentially for really everyone in the state of Wisconsin and high school athletics as a whole to reestablish their purpose and really get back to why are we doing what we're doing, education-based athletics. I had the opportunity to take a team of 3 coaches back in September of 23, so just this past month, September 6th, I believe it was, and it revolves around 4 important questions. Why do you coach? Why do you coach the way that you do? What does it feel like to be coached by you? And how do you define success? So that's a little bit of that grounding work and why we're doing what we do, which will kind of tie in at the end of my rambling here as we go on, some of the work and where we see ourselves going in the future. As far as our athletics and activities, throughout the school year, we offer 27 different athletic sports seasons. You can see them listed there. 25 WIA-sanctioned sports seasons occur throughout the school year. This upcoming school year, obviously, the addition of girls and boys lacrosse as far as offerings go. At any given point, we are also offering 45 to 50 clubs or other activities. I wish I could nail that number down a little bit better, but with some clubs, they're a little bit more fluid of whether they're running at that time and whatnot, but we landed that at any given moment, 45 to 50 is roughly what's in operation. So we offer quite a bit. And then as far as our participation data goes, there's just a quick snapshot of what we have there. We have 570 students involved in athletics, 378 in activities, and 226 in the fine arts. So you've got that breakdown there that I won't spend too much time on. What I do want to talk about is the overarching statistics. We had 1,022 registrations come in last year for something. That's 781 students' unique registrations. So that you could have students registering for multiple things. That means roughly 72% of our student body is participating in some sort of athletic and activity throughout the school year, based on what we have recorded. Could be a little bit more, just based on not having some things written down, but that's what we have written down at this point. As far as our experiences throughout the year, we competed or directly competed with at least 70 unique schools that we had some sort of competitive experience with. We also contracted 273 unique officials for our 621 open spots for officiating throughout the year. And this is probably my favorite statistic. We have some sort of athletic activity going. We have some sort of coach meeting or coach professional development opportunity going on 305 of 365 calendar days. There is no off season for athletics and activities. We are always doing something. I recall sitting down and trying to figure that out last year, and that's where I landed, 305 of 365. There are only 60 days where I couldn't figure out what we were doing on that day. We had something going. As far as academic achievement, I wish I had more data on this particular piece, but this is what we were able to get. For a student athlete, the student athlete average GPA was 3.43. The whole school is 3.2 as far as where we were able to land on last year. Now, when you consider that whole school of 3.2, that includes the student athlete GPA, that 3.43 segment that's in there. Our attendance rate of our student athletes is 95%. The whole school average is 87.7. So when you look at that, you're also looking at that whole school attendance rate, also including our athletics or our student athletes in there as well. I will say, going throughout the school years as well, you hear many anecdotal success stories from the positive impact that clubs and activities have on our students, their attendance rate and their success in the classroom. It's always very rewarding to hear. As far as community engagement goes, as far as what we've offered here, and this, we're going to enter in some slides that make me very uncomfortable because you always worry about what are you forgetting or who are you not highlighting that you should be, but this is where we're at right now. So I will apologize in advance, as you usually have to do as an activities director as well, for forgetting you in some way, shape, or form. But this is what we had. 209 home hosted athletic events were hosted in the 22-23 school year. Some bigger events that we hosted, MadMon 2022 in December, that was a Model UN conference for Dane County, a very, very successful event back in September of 22. If anyone's been to Silver Stage, every year that is an incredible event, especially when you see the setup and the amount of participation that it takes to pull that off. And then you go there on that day and see how many moving pieces there are. It is always an incredible thing for our community, an incredible, really work of art to see in place on that third Saturday in February, I think it works out to be. HOSA hosting their community blood drive. DECA competed at nationals in Florida. If I can't say enough, if you saw the musical last spring, that was incredible. I don't think I've seen any sort of musical any better at any level. That was so well done. So just incredible things that our students are doing. And then also we had student athletes and many others going to our elementary schools and completing some literacy or some reading activities to those students. Continuing with that community engagement, we were able to be the Badger Conference culminating event host for boys swim as well as boys and girls track and field last year. We were able to be a neutral site host for a sectional final girls volleyball game, which we will again this year, as well as a sectional semifinal boys basketball game between Marshall and Belleville. As far as we also operate an in-house concession stand over at our stadium as well as in the gym. We were able to raise $21,000 for our clubs and activities through operations of that stand. So I always think that's pretty cool. These next two statistics are interesting to me because there's a little caveat to it. I was able to land on that we had at least 12,788 spectators come through our gym, and that we also had 7,073 spectators at the stadium. Now, these are just through ticket tracking. So that doesn't include the passes that get people in. It doesn't include any of our student IDs because they just show an ID and they walk through. So it's not really a good way to get data. But I know our students would add to that significantly. For example, on the 2 weeks before school started, we had 106 GDS students come through our gate for varsity football, which was pretty cool to see. This is another slide where you're like, oh, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but I'm pretty sure we got it. Athletic team successes. We had 4 conference championships last year in boys soccer, girls swim and dive, baseball and boys tennis, 4 regional champions in boys soccer, girls basketball, boys hockey, and baseball. And we had 17 state qualifying athletes as individuals representing girls tennis, girls swim and dive, boys golf, as well as girls track and field last year. Future goals and initiative, a lot of it is working on defining coach purpose through that inside out initiative and making sure we have that grounding work established for all of our coaches, that we're identifying opportunities for growth and equity and inclusion within our activities and athletics, identify and act upon areas of expansion, we have a growing student body, making sure that we are offering appropriate options for them, as well as updating job descriptions and evaluations to better reflect those core athletic department values, athletic and activity department values. As far as student testimonials, you will see up there, there is a word cloud that I quickly put together at the end of each season. We try to survey our student athletes on their experience. And one of the questions is, what is the best thing about your athletic experience? And you'll see the most common thing you see up there is like team and teammates. And that's pretty cool as well, the ability to be on a team, how powerful that is. The 4.4 average coach rating. So each student rates their coach in several different areas of coaching. And they rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. And overall, in the last 2 years, the aggregate number or aggregate average is 4.4, which is super high. I think it speaks a lot about the quality work our coaches have been able to do for our student athletes. And then, of course, with athletics, there's some challenges that exist out there and some solutions as far as how we're handling it right now. The bus driver shortage is very real, which has required us to increase our planning up front, be very communicative with our bus company. And we've also encouraged our coaches to obtain their CDL. I believe we have 2 or 3 coaches that currently have their CDL that helps us out. And this is another just fun statistic. We had 726 bus trips of some kind taken for a school activity or athletic event last school year. The official shortage is very real. Even tomorrow is up in the air for a couple of events. So what we've been doing for that, and you've probably heard the official shortage, number one is fan behavior being an issue there, and we've done some initiatives there. We have a thank you note initiative, which was students started back in October of last year. So what we do is before each I shouldn't say each event, but the majority of our events, we have student athletes handwrite thank you notes to our officials, and they're handed out at the event. Last year in the winter and spring seasons, we handed out 381 handwritten thank you notes to our officials from our students. Our student athletes, we've also created some sportsmanship PA announcements. We kind of alluded to, we attended the Badger Conference Sportsmanship Summit with a group of 6 student athletes last year as well. And that we also have explicit coach expectations in our preseason meetings of best way to conduct ourselves around officials. Coach hiring shortages, I was looking to get this data, but it does not feel like we get a ton of applicants for our open athletic and activities positions, and that's not uncommon. It's very challenging, especially in some sports. And what we've really focused on is a supportive environment, focusing on retention of our coaches and growing coaches. 45% of our coaches are on staff, which also means we need to be very flexible in how we're meeting the needs of our off-staff coaches. For instance, making sure that myself is available. I have several coaches where if we need to meet, generally it's after 7 p.m. at night in order to meet those needs because they don't have the flexibility during the day to be able to meet. So we're trying to make sure that we have that flexible environment for them. One of the things that I'm fairly proud of at this point kind of dawned on me over the summer. As of today, we don't expect any varsity head coach turnover from last school year. I wish I had something to compare that to other schools, but that just seems unheard of to me. I don't think I've heard of that anywhere. And then event worker shortage. Getting people to one of the big challenges in athletics and activities is we are an industry that thrives on people going above and beyond. And since the pandemic, that shifted as far as people doing that and being a lot more mindful of what they're taking on. So we've had to shift a little bit in what our expectations are. But one of the things like we did is a more appropriate pay structure for our event workers to get them there. That has helped. And then also making sure that we have a culture of gratitude established with myself, our coaches, and our athletes so that event workers are also in a supportive environment and that they feel that their work really matters for our community. And then right there's a logo that tells me that that's the end of my rambling and that's kind of a quick summary of what's going on in athletics and activities. I guess at this point, what questions would you have?
Eric?
I have a question. It's a two-part question.
Mhm.
With the GPA that you mentioned before, for our high school athletes, is there a requirement for their GPA or grades to participate in sports?
Yeah, so there's no flat GPA requirement for the most part, but what they cannot have is any failing grades. So if they have one failing grade, it would render them ineligible for competition. We don't make them ineligible for practice. Usually we want to keep them involved with the team and connected in some way. It's usually a positive environment for them. If they have multiple failing grades, they would be really ineligible for the quarter, but they have an opportunity to gain their eligibility back at progress report, which generally happens, some part through the quarter if they've reached a certain benchmark.
Is that a WIAA rule or is that our district? Per our district?
That is per our district or our high school policy. WIAA just says you can't have 2 or more failing grades, and then they do the 21-day. We use that for 1 failing grade, which is pretty common among schools.
Joe, do you want to tell them about the athletic code? I don't know that board members get oriented.
do you wanna
Susan,
start?
Susan, let Eric finish and then,
Okay.
okay.
It was just relevant to,
Yep, I appreciate that. Thank you, Susan. So my follow-up is, has there been any thought of lowering that restriction for, like, say, if they get an F, right? They're suspended for 1 game. Is that what you said?
They're suspended for 21 days at the point in which that the grades are posted. So for some student athletes, it has an impact
That's
on
for
their.
games, not practice.
Correct, yes.
So, and that's a Monona Grove district thing.
Yep.
Has there been any thought about not doing that? Because I'm wondering, I'm just thinking if we have students that are failing in school, but they're showing up on activities, which is a positive thing, right? Which could help keep them in school. Has there been any thought of like lowering that restriction so that they can participate in games?
Not necessarily. The one part that we revised after the 21-22 school year is when we had multiple failing grades. It used to be you were ineligible for the quarter, and there was no getting that back. We did revise that to where if at progress you were displaying all Cs or better, we would give you your eligibility back. The 1F, we did a survey of like coaches, athletes, and teachers, and they were pretty comfortable with where that was at. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Susan, and then Elizabeth.
Just to follow up on Eric's questions, I know truthfully in the past, sometimes we'll have a student that, it's a class, it's a particular teacher, it's a time of year, who knows, won't be successful in that class. And effectively, it's 21 days before they can get back. And that to me, again, I would really like us to look at that, because I think our focus is to help students stay motivated and engaged. And occasionally, when that athletic piece turns off, you may lose that piece, and we've worked on that really hard. So Eric, when we first started on this, and I can't tell you what the year was, it was a huge group of people that wrote the basic athletic code. And it was coaches, teachers, parents, students, and I haven't gotten any feedback about revisions or who works on it or who's the team that keeps, it's like our policy committee. I mean, we have to meet and review policies every month for hours. So what's the background on how you, and the other thing that can happen is you can have a student who really wants to come back and will do whatever they have to do to change that grade, including taking extra tests or doing extra work or doing extra credit. And sometimes you have a staff member who isn't comfortable with that. So how does that, do we have a consistent piece for how that process works if they're trying to reestablish themselves?
So I hear what you're saying, and I do agree with you that we want to keep that athletic and activity piece with them because that can be their motivating factor. What I will say, like from the grading perspective, I think our high school has done a lot of work with making sure that our grades are more equitable and reflecting more on the student. Our teachers are very good at working with them. We have a revision and retake policy that's in place right now. I would say when it comes to failing a grade, I don't think the topic should be what can we do to keep this individual playing. I think the topic should be what do we do to keep this, to pass this kid, or to get this kid to pass the class.
That's where some of the feedback I've gotten, not only as a board member, but as a parent, is that doesn't always go smoothly.
I mean, perhaps, but I mean, with all of the work that we've done in the high school, I am very confident that our grades are accurately representing the students' work, especially with what we've done with grading for equity in the last 2 years. That's where I think really the focus needs to be on grading, not necessarily changing the athletic code policy.
Thank you for this presentation. I really always enjoy when you come because I always feel like I learn a lot. I feel like you
Thanks.
do such a great job of giving so much thorough, in-depth detail in like a very like concise, easily digestible way. And so I want to say thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. I especially appreciate the data that you brought in. And I guess a wondering that I have is thinking about this academic achievement data and the attendance data, both of which are incredibly important. I'd be curious to know what that looks like on the non-athletic side of the house. And so just sort of as you're thinking about continuous improvement, which you strike me as a person for whom that is something you take
Yes.
seriously, thinking about next time you come and chat with us to think about whether or not we're seeing overarching trends, not just our student athletes in improvement, but also for our youth that are involved in activity in general.
I 100% agree with you. And that was a pain point of mine when I was pulling this, is I wasn't pulling it it wasn't working the way that I wanted it to where I was comfortable presenting it. I 100% agree with you. I want to know that data. I'm still working on how
Yeah.
I properly get that data.
Well, and I think if the data is not, I don't know what the data looks like, but let's just walk down a theoretical road where like maybe the data is, not as lovely as the student athlete data. I think that that's okay too, right? And then you think about what are the elements of being a student athlete that, right,
Correct.
can or cannot transfer into some activities, or sort of which activities are doing well versus others, kind of thing. So I just think it would be really interesting to see. And I think it's a really potentially good story to think about the impact of engaging in your school community, no matter what that looks like, and how that has a sort of wide-ranging impact on just your general overarching ability to be a student at school. One question, so that was a piece of feedback. I had one other question for you, but then I lost it because I got so excited to talk about your data that I forgot about the other thing I was going to ask you. So it'll come to me. And I remember now. So what are your what are your goals for this year? What would success look like for you when you're back here giving us another state of athletic and activities report? What would you be excited to report out on?
I would be excited to be able to articulate at this point next year, at least 35% of our coaches on staff and what their purpose is. Why do they coach? That would be where my head would be at right now. Some other minor things are saying that we were able to keep 95% of our games with the official and bus shortage and stuff like that. But I mean, coach purpose is a huge thing of mine. What I would like to bring to are a little bit more of engagement from our student athletes and committee work, such as being able to come up here and say, these are our student section leaders and here's what they're working on. These are our student athlete leaders and this is what they're working on. I'd love to get to that point. And I think we've made progress on that. We're just not quite there yet. But yeah, I mean, honestly, overarching, I'd love to come to this next year, sit right there, and I'd have 4 student athletes giving this presentation.
That'd be amazing. I would love to see that too. Great. Thanks, Joe. This was fantastic.
Hello?
Yeah, I'll reiterate Elizabeth's comments. Really appreciate the data and the presentation. My question is around trends. Do you have any sense for, with the 3 categories, athletics, activities, and fine arts, are they all growing at some pace? Are some of them shrinking in favor of others? One thing I was thinking is, I assume there's far more activity options now than say 10 years ago or 20 years ago, et cetera. And I would imagine that to some degree that may pull from other categories as students have more options. But I'm just curious, are you seeing any of these, are any of them static year over year? Are they all growing? Any of them shrinking?
The activities piece, I don't have a good grasp on where it is right now. It's a very messy way of getting data. The athletes is very clean because we have to do registration, get paperwork and all that stuff. The one trend I've already noticed this year is our athletic numbers have exploded. Just off the top of my head, I think last year our football team had 110 tryouts. This year we had 140, which is a huge increase. We've seen that. I'm trying to think. There's another sport too. Soccer is always huge. But our athletic registrations were way up this year. And we anticipate the same next year as well. Once we get through winter and spring, I'll have a better idea of maybe it tapered off once we got to the winter and the spring. But as of right now, it looks like we have a ton of kids interested in athletics.
I actually have.
And Krisha had his hand up too.
Okay, I'm going to just quickly go. So I wanted to, I actually attended the game 2 weeks ago, the football game, and
Something.
yes, and the marching band was awesome. My daughter's in it too. But what I really want to commend you on is the sportsmanship piece. I heard students announce about the sportsmanship, and I think that really made a difference. So I really want to commend you on that. I do have 2 questions about the participation of students of color and students with disabilities. Do you have any data on that?
I do. I pulled it last week. I'm still kind of tinkering with it and making sure it's representing accurately, and I have some segments of it. What I can say is that from what I initially pulled, our students with different ethnic backgrounds and students with disabilities are participating proportionally to what our student body is right now, which was, I remember that sticking out because I was a little surprised by that. Usually you're trying to make some ground in that. But proportionally, we were pretty spot on. So that is something I'm still working on and making sure that it's as accurate as it should be.
Thank you. Krishna, and then Peter.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is what I really wanted to say to you for giving this presentation. As a student athlete myself, and you being involved in more clubs that I even know how to count, I really wanted to stress that for me, at the very least, sports and activities are essential parts of my high school experience. I don't think that there's any way my story could have existed at all, perhaps not even gotten me to this position without athletics and activities. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. In that regard, I wanted to remark upon some of the debate earlier. From my experience, especially from boys track and field, academics takes a central role in athletics. We do commonly stress that if you do not have the grades, respective of our standards, then participation is a penalty you will have to face in regards to that. I think that the school's efforts in equitability has been apparent throughout my time at this high school. And I would say that when it comes to the importance of academics in regards to athletic involvement, there is a reasonable debate to be had about whether or not athletics and activities are a privilege, provided that a student has the grades to achieve, or if it's a right for a student to be able to build that diversified set of skills at the time of high school, regardless of their grades. As per your question earlier, Susan, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been any sort of extra credit allowed at my high school since last year. That certainly has had an effect on students like me to be able to increase our grades. However, I will say that when it comes to failing students, at least in track and field, I would assume, and to the best of my knowledge, they are in a slimmer minority. Of course, that's not to underwrite the problem, but that is to say that I think before a student with poor grades gets onto the field or gets in front of the podium, they should be able to have the resources to work with their teacher to better apply themselves in their class, to make sure that that problem is dealt with long before that ever has to be a barrier for them. I'm certainly looking forward to how we can better work towards that goal, especially during this year. However, I would like to say that overall, we are all tremendously thankful for the abundance of opportunities that you help provide for us each and every year at Monona Grove High School.
Peter?
How do we reach the 28% of students who don't participate in activities?
It's a great
What do you think we
question.
should do next?
To reach the 28%. Well, one piece that I will say that has that immediately comes to mind when I think about reaching the 28%, we have a student and family engagement coordinator in Jack Jackson who is doing a wonderful job in trying to get kids involved with activities. The number one thing that's going to get kids out there is some sort of relationship, a connection. And Jack has done a wonderful job making sure that he's making connections with kids. And that's ultimately going to be what gets kids in those clubs and activities. Sometimes maybe you don't necessarily hit on the interest, but if you have a relationship with a kid, they're going to come do your club or activity just because they want to hang out with you. They want to be around you. So the number one thing is making sure that we're creating those bridges to create those relationships with the 28% and that we're reaching them in some way, shape, or form.
You know, I asked that question because, you showed us, we get better attendance and better score, performance or, and I think that the activities are an important part of that and getting to as many students as possible, and it also there's a personal development factor too. And I think it's an important thing to get as many students as possible. And I think we should think, and I'd really like us to think about that 20% and what we can do, because it's very easy to focus on the kids who are participating. But what are the barriers to that 28% who aren't impaired? And that's the other way to ask that question is not what should we do next, but what are the barriers to them participating? What is keeping them from participating? The other thing is I would like to know from the data that you have is how, if I break it down by our demographics, what kind of participation do we have? That to me is more. There are students who are going to do fine, and there are students that need our help, and to do fine. And I'd like to see your data on this participation broken down by the usual groups that we participate and see if that, and then that feeds back into that second question about what are the barriers, and are there barriers to certain populations of our students that end up being bigger than we anticipate and reducing their opportunities for participation. Thoughts?
I will work on it.
Krishna?
And thank you. Just one question I did have. Looking at your challenges and solutions slide, I wanted to ask, especially from a student perspective, if there's any way that we, the student body, can assist you in applying these solutions or providing feedback.
Well, I don't know how old you have to be to get your CDL, but that's number one.
I'll do my best.
So it's a good question, and some of them that doesn't really necessarily always have simple solutions. Number one is like the sportsmanship efforts. We have to understand that, like, as student athletes out there, everything you do during that time has a brand to it. I personally, like, I recall a couple of years ago, we were talking about officials' fees and making sure that those were more up to date with what the area is and that our pay would be, comparable with what's going on. That is just a piece of it to me. With the officials thing, we also have to make sure that when officials, workers come to Monona Grove, it is the best possible experience provided. That's going to keep officials here. We're right outside of Madison. We don't need to entice officials to drive. They're here. We just have to make sure that the experience at Monona Grove is well-rounded in every way, shape, or form. If as students you're thanking officials on your way out, they'll remember it and they'll be back. That's going to be huge. The other thing is obviously, like, at some point, all of our students are going to graduate. Give back to the sport. We need officials. Even if, like, during college, it's an extra way for you to make cash. Do it. It helps. And then you might be surprised how much you stay connected with it and just continue on with it. That's a huge thing. But the brand and the experience, I think as students, we need to be mindful of that, because it's not necessarily just about your year, it's about the legacy you leave. And even though if an official has a bad experience with a senior student or whatever it is, they may never come back, even though that student graduated. So we have to make sure that we're leaving a legacy, coaches, athletes, spectators, for the next generation that's coming in. And as students, you also need to realize that as leaders, it's not necessarily about us serving your senior year. It is about you serving Monona Grove so that the next generation is ready to come up and be better than what you were. That's part of your role. And I think that's a big philosophical overarching piece, and it is a lot easier for me to say right here than it is as a student to do, but those are the things that need to be in all of our students' heads, that what we do matters for a long time. I'll get off my soapbox there. Does that answer your question? Or CDL? You're going to get your CDL?
It does. However, I wanted to ask a follow-up because I absolutely agree. But I want to know, how can we bring that exact message to the student body? Because, I mean, yes, it is already enforced, especially with terms of sportsmanship. However, I think that there's a lot that you mentioned that I think could really apply and resonate with our student body, but yet I don't feel as though that message has been passed on to its full extent.
Which I agree with you. And like I said, sitting here, it's really easy for me to say and get on that soapbox and tell you what it is. I think a piece of it is making sure that that's instilled with our coaches and advisors, that's a message that they're sending. I think it's also something that really at the middle school level that needs to be foundationally established, and then even at the freshman level, because it's something that you're going to live for 4 years understanding. Once you get up here, it takes certain initiatives, it takes common language, it takes messages. Some of it is some of the work that I haven't done a great job of yet this year is, like, the first 2 years I was working monthly with our student athlete leaders and going over messages like that and making sure that we were on the same page and kind of diagnosing what does that look like. Also working through having difficult conversations with teammates. What does that look like? Having difficult conversations with coaches. So there's a lot of small pieces that, like, we're not going to be there tomorrow. But if we have all of these small pieces put in place over the course of 4 years, we create a curriculum that ultimately we're hitting a higher percentage of students with that mindset. Probably will never get to 100% of students have that mindset, but the bigger chunk that you have, the better off you're going to be. And especially for our athletics and activities to get where we want them to be, we can't just rely on adult leaders. We need student leaders to do it.
Philip is next, and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was just thinking the 28% that Peter was talking about got me thinking, and this, I realize this may be hard to, get numbers on, but I'm curious about gaps in our activities and sports. I would imagine within that 20%, there might be some kids who are, participating in something outside of the district because it's not offered. Yeah, well, I was thinking less about having a job, but more just, is there a sport activity, something fine arts related that we just don't offer in a way that works? Do you have any sense for that? Are there any, particular sports activities, et cetera, that you're aware of that would be great for us to offer that we don't? And there's probably some percentage of that 20% that isn't participating because they're in an outside club or, club sport or something like that.
So I recall I sent out a survey to our student body in, I think, March of last year, asking a simple way to put it is, what do you do that I don't know about? And there's definitely a decent amount of our population that's involved with something that is not offered by our school. There was a few things that were fairly loud in that, but what I don't have a good grasp on is I don't know if it was students that wouldn't already be in that 72%, at least from what I was able to gather. It's a good question. I recall looking at it. I don't have hard data on that, but just scanning it, it was kind of like, well, I know this student does this already. This student does this. Like even some of them were like they would participate in some sort of club sport in the spring, but I already knew they were participating in one of our spring sports as it was. Same with fall, or they're participating in club fall sport and then they're with us in the winter. That's what I notice more often, not necessarily students that are totally not participating in our programs, at least from that regard.
Just going back on kind of Krishna and your back and forth around the brand, which I think is a really smart way to think about it, right? Like, what is our brand of Monona Grove athletics and activities? And it makes me wonder about, you had mentioned kind of common language at the middle school. It makes me wonder, like, how much you extend that down even to the upper elementary school, right? When you think about strings and there are activities and some clubs that start there. And what would it look like to start building that common language, start building that brand piece even for those kids, right? So if I'm going to play strings in 4th grade, I may end up being in, orchestra for my entire time here, right? And high school probably shouldn't be the first time I'm hearing that message. What would it look like if I heard it as a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old, right, all the way through? So just something to think about.
Yeah, I'm formulating a thought, and you're watching it and develop in real time. So I think, like, an extension upon your thought is, like, when I look at some of, like, the character traits and all of that kind of stuff that I just talked with Krishna, that that doesn't have to be exclusive to athletics and activities. Like, that can be taught during the day, team building activities, like those types
Or
of
high
things.
school athletic and activities,
Right.
right?
It doesn't have to be limited there. It can be something that's a thread throughout the entire curriculum as you look at it, K through 12.
Yeah. So Krista and her crew are looking at SEL and social justice curriculum changes. There might be some common language moments there for thinking about how to pull in some of that language into what we're doing curricular-wise for social emotional learning, for example, because this idea of, sportsmanship, perseverance, right, respect, all of those things I think fold really nicely into that.
Susan?
Elizabeth, I'm sorry, Rochelle.
No, and I'm I just wanted to say quickly, I have a kiddo who's in cross country. And the amount of excellence in sportsmanship and just overall just community and kindness and thoughtfulness is fantastic. So I do appreciate all that you guys put into it. Question as to, do your coaches talk to each other from different sports and different advisors to share what they have found works well for motivating the students?
Yes and no. So every year in August, for our athletic coaches, we do a coaches kickoff. which is actually, oh gosh, I should have highlighted that. We actually, the last 2 years, we've had students take a leadership portion in that, and they've presented to coaches on topics that are interesting them, and they'll present to coaches that way, and then we have a dinner afterwards, and that's when you'll usually see some coaches interacting with some topics and whatnot. Advisors, it's tough. I mean, most of our advisors are in the building, so they're able to kind of interact and talk in that way. And it's just another one of those things I could add as a challenge to athletics and activities is when does that happen? What does that time look like? And then also, like, with all of our coaches and our activity advisors, these aren't their full-time jobs. So we're already asking a lot out of them. So it's being mindful of like that supportive environment of, all right, am I going to give you another thing to do and another thing to do? But it is very real and kind of another one of those good thoughts of how can we break that barrier to where that's able to happen, because it would be very valuable for our kids.
I also want to say, my older kiddo had a friend who wanted to start a club, and he in the middle of the year started a club and become an advisor. So also there is some flexibility, and it can be very student motivated and driven.
Yeah, and I would say for the most part, most of our clubs are student-driven in some way. We have, if you want to see just beautiful chaos, our activity fair on the first Wednesday of the school year, it's like all student-run, and you just watch these students get so excited for some of the most random things, but there's so much energy in there, and it's such a great way to start the school year. First Wednesday of the school year, end of the school day, it's an incredibly chaotic but just beautiful thing to watch.
Can I make a recommendation for that?
Yes.
I was like, please.
Yeah, well, since COVID, a lot of kids do have anxiety. So kids who may not be participating and signing up because large groups of people are very uncomfortable for them. So having a walkthrough for a smaller groups or kids who may feel overwhelmed to see what's offered and find something that fits.
I love it.
Great suggestion. Susan?
Joe, I also wanted to thank you for coming tonight and giving us this information, because, you know, you sit back and watch the football coach when you watched him play tennis as a senior. I'm sure it can bring you some humor. Sorry, Brendan.
Oh, I know.
But you think about the other piece that I've seen, particularly in the Monona Grove community, through activities, not just sports. I think we probably saw more of that, but you saw it in the other activities. I came in one night and was visiting with a neighbor, and they brought me into the living room, and here were 8 kids helping tutor each other for an exam. So they build these relationships. They understand the levels they have to meet to be able to participate and to finish. And what was interesting, back in our time, our kids were doing the exact same thing. They wanted everybody that wanted to play to be able to get out on the ice and play. And they would do these great big groups of we went through a ton of pieces. But on top of that, then you have a year. This team was 21-1 at the end of the year, and over half of them graduated with honors. So you bring them together in an environment where they can find, and I think Rochelle was alluding to this with the COVID, where they can find comfort, and you help make that happen. And I think it's wonderful that you're doing that. That's super. No other questions or comments?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next is the superintendent report. Dan?
Okay, I've got just one item this evening, the third Friday count. You have a memo from Mark Powell. You've been getting, regular enrollment updates. The third Friday count, the reason that Mark's responsible for it is because, of course, our funding is based on per pupil. So the data that he included in this memo are the ones that we have to report to DPI. And so you have the resident membership is one number that's used as part of it. And then, of course, we have open enrollment as a per pupil basis. And then he also did include the total head count. So this is fairly consistent with the numbers that I'd given you as preliminary numbers, where last year's head count was 3526, this year 3686. Depending on the report you look at, you might see slightly different ones in the future because this includes the partial FT for funding purposes. You know, for a 4K student is, you know, a 0.6 and early childhood is different percentages and so on. But anyway, these are the numbers, very consistent with what we had been projecting, and I'll continue to give you updates throughout the year as we move along.
What were you projecting?
We projected about 3,700, so we're, you know, just under that on this count.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Dan. All right, next are board reports. First report is Student Board Representative Report. Krishna?
Thank you so much. As a point of inquiry before I begin, is this at all restricted by time? Okay, don't worry. It's just 4 bullet points. It's just 4 bullet points. I wasn't Model UN though, so if this gets a bit lengthy, let me know. Anyway.
Reasonable, Krishna.
What?
It's reasonable.
Reasonable, Chris.
Oh, okay, okay. I try my best. So earlier today, let's start with marching band. Over 90 students, myself included, from Monona Grove High School pep band ventured to students across the district in the spirit of homecoming. As the trumpet section leader, I can tell you that it was a momentous way to spread school spirit. All schools in the district were visited with the exception of MG21, and the band was joined by the Black Student Union, the Asian Club, the dance team, and representatives from girls golf, girls volleyball, and the high school football team. Moving on to Key Club. They volunteered at the Brat Wagon on October 7th at Camp Randall and Fall Fest at Aldo Leopold on October 6th. Key Club facilitates numerous volunteer events throughout the year and are crucial to increasing Monona Grove's community presence. There's actually, in the winter, they put up an ice rink over by Buck and Honey's. Through Key Club, I helped build that, so that was just one of the many stories I had with them. Very thankful for that. Furthermore, the AP Environmental Science class actually took a field trip to Aldo Leopold today. Around 30 students from AP Environmental Science, taught by Mr. Newman of Monona Grove High School, visited Aldo Leopold. The activities included studying the nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus cycles, biogenic diversity, and examining the characteristics of a deciduous forest biome of which Monona is located in. As a student of that class, and yes, that is the only way I knew how to pronounce all of that before, I really am just excited to see the opportunities afforded this class and seeing how we can become better citizens of our environment. Finally, and I was told by Ms. Krigo to present this to the school board, I am really glad to do it because 27 tenor and bass singers from MGHS and GDS choirs went to UW Milwaukee Sing Out Festival on September 22nd, where they sang alongside over 700 students from the Midwest. They had the opportunity to work with choral directors and professors from UW Milwaukee and hear their tenor bass choir Cameradian, which happened to have an MGHS alumni, Owen Groth, featured as a soloist. Overall, Ms. Krigo said that it was a great morning of music and opportunity for our tenor and bass students to learn some new vocal tips and tricks, not to mention make some incredible music. I will say, especially as a student representative and a senior at Monona Grove High School, these 4 points are not at all truly representative of just the immense scale of activities and, of course, athletics that go on at Monona Grove High School on a daily basis. I see here that we're actually going to have a report later by my French teacher, Madame Spey. So I'm really looking forward to that because I truly think that in order to be accurately representative of all the clubs here, we would just go on a scale that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. So understand that this is merely a snapshot about all the things that Monona Grove students do on the daily, and I could not be more proud to be a part of that community. Thanks.
Great report, Krishna.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Am I allowed to ask a question?
yes, you can.
I hope so. Don't make it a tough one.
No, I won't, I promise. I'm just curious. So thank you for the report. It was really lovely. How did you decide what to report on? Like, given the amount of things that you could have chosen?
Yeah, so Mitch McGrath and Katie and I had a meeting last week where we devised a system that at the end of each month on Friday, we'd send out a Google Doc to all teachers to allow them to fill out what they wanted to be included in this report. Athletic events, because they're already still reported on, are not included, but everything else is fair game. Unfortunately, since we devised this last week and I did not get the sheet until today, there were a few discrepancies as to what could be included. While I can report on a lot as my oral report, in the future, we hope to have a more extensive list that could be released as a written report for further review by the school board and the public.
Okay, I love that. Thanks, Krishna. And that's awesome.
Next is the Monona Grove Education Foundation. Susan?
Yes, again, I have notes, I was unable to attend the meeting as I was in a meeting out of town. But I have some notes, and Dan, if you have anything you want to add, that would be great. So, one of the things, so basically what happens at the Education Foundation meeting is that several groups will come forward and request funding for a particular activity. And one of the activities that came forward was Girls on the Run, which basically operates out of Granite Ridge, as I understand it. And at this point, it's not a school-related activity, and so they continue to be concerned about approving funding for non-school-related activities. So again, as we look at those kinds of activities, whatever way we can find to support them through the district would be great. But that was consistent with some decisions they were making about a few other activities previously. And then Dan gave a report about the school configuration for K2. And apparently there was some concern stated about the demographics, but the report I received was that Dan did an excellent job of reviewing the demographics. So thank you very much for that. But then there's a fishing club at the high school. Krishna, are you doing that well? I mean, you stand yourself a
Crystal,
little
you don't
bit
have any
here.
time.
You know,
You can't be
come down
fishing.
on the islands with us. So it is a school-affiliated high school club, and they were requesting an amount for supplies. I don't know if that's worms or, fishing rods or anyway, whatever it is. That was approved. $500 was approved. And then they are currently working on their annual fundraising, and they are putting together the letters for donors, and those are in progress. And they've also worked extensively on snack bags. This has been going on for a couple of years. And right now, based on the funding that they have and their ability to do the snack bags, they have had to cap the number of bags they have at 150. So again, they're looking for volunteers, anyone that's willing to help can contact Jason McCutcheon at the Monona Grove Education Foundation, or just call Tish, and I'm sure she'll channel them to the right way. And then, in addition, one of the members of the board gets really excited about homecoming, and she was having really fun with that. And so she encouraged the board to donate a $250 prize for the nicest banner. Now, I don't know what the criteria, do you have any? I don't either. It's gonna be
The judging
judged or
criteria.
something like that. And I'm going, oh, okay, I don't know. But I'm sure there's some determination that's gonna be made by that. But basically, it's an ability for the foundation to make a donation to a group that's participating in homecoming, and that's a school-affiliated group.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
I have a question about Girls on the Run. Two questions. One, does it only run at Granite Ridge, not at Winnequa?
Correct.
And then, is it standard for it to not be like a school sponsor? I mean, I know a lot of schools do it, so I just,
Right, it's similar to like a Y program. They're their own organization. They're a
God, well, I knew that they were
501c3.
their own organization. I guess I just assumed it always operated. I don't know how I assumed it operated, but not that way, obviously. Okay, great, thank you.
And Winnipa did have something that was similar, but they weren't Girls on the Run because you have to pay to be part of, that. It's much more costly, so they had an alternative type
The
of,
People's Girls on their own.
yeah,
Got it.
Kids on the Run.
yeah.
I know, actually, in Iowa, in Iowa City, it's affiliated with the schools. So again, I think it's just a matter of, I think it's its own 501c.
Yeah, I knew that. I guess I didn't know how the structure went.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Krishna, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Two things. One, just about earlier, my friend Tiesto actually runs a fishing club. I was going to join, but something about it seemed a little fishy.
Aha, Krishna.
Anyway, I'll be here all night, folks. The second thing I wanted to say was, I remember over the summer we discussed about how the Monona Grove Education Foundation can further outreach to students. Is there any way that I, as a representative or the greater student body, could assist you in expanding your presence, especially in the high school?
I totally agree. I've actually brought your name and your interest in being involved in the foundation to Jason, and maybe the best avenue is through Dan, but we should talk about that, because it would be, I mentioned, it would be really nice. See, I'm only the board representative, school board representative on their board. So I'm not a board member, I'm not a voting board member, but there are voting board members who would be very interested in you and your position.
I'll just add, one of the things that the foundation's been working on and that I've been working with them is to make sure that our staff understand what the different opportunities are that are available. For years, we've had the innovation grants, and I think, most of our teachers are well aware of those, but they've expanded into a number of other opportunities. So the grant they just approved for the fishing club, for example, falls under a new grant opportunity called the Starting Line Fund. And the interesting thing is we sent a message out to all of our staff, at the beginning of the year, reminding them of these opportunities. And on the MGF's website, they have the Starting Line Fund, and which fit perfectly with the startup of the new club, right? And so when they got the application for the Pay It Forward program, which went to Krista. She knew it, so it was the wrong funding mechanism, but we forwarded it on. Well, here to find out, if on the website at the bottom of the Starting Line Fund, the link for the Apply Today takes you to the PIF fund. So it was our own mistake, internally there. So it was awesome. Our advisors followed the exact direction that they were supposed to. They applied and worked exactly the way that it should. So anyway, to that point on the communication, we're thrilled that, we had this application. That's what the money's for, and that'll be continuing work.
Right away. I mean, that was, you knew right where to go and
Yeah.
talk to me about it, and so they were really excited about that.
Well, and I think the other point that Krishna, I think, is making that I think is really important here is the communication point. And I think having a student there would really help. So for instance, every single school, except for my understanding is Granite Ridge, because they haven't put that together, has an endowment, a $10,000 endowment. And the interest off that endowment goes directly to the school. And sometimes it's a little bit, and sometimes it's $300, which could do a lot. And what happens is that staff isn't aware it's there. So sometimes it's just communication, Again, it depends upon how long you've been involved in the foundation and then whether or not you're involved in the school. Because I remember trying to raise that $10,000 for each school. Some it was easier than others.
Thank you, Susan. Next is the Personnel Committee. Eric?
Personnel Committee met on October 4th and October 9th, and we have a meeting coming up next week too on October 16th. On the 4th, we exchanged proposals with MGE. Huh? What?
No, I just said 16 in my head to remind myself, so, sorry.
Okay.
I said it under my breath very quietly. Didn't mean to disturb you.
Heard it,
I gotta hide myself.
though. That wasn't like under your breath, because I totally heard it.
I know, I'm sorry.
Under your breath would have been like, but you were like, of the 16th, and I was like, what? And then
Carry on.
we met on the 4th and exchanged proposals with MGA for the para professionals, initial base wage, and the supplemental pay requests, and we're still in the process of that, so we're meeting again on the 16th. Then we met Wednesday, is that, no, 9th, Monday. And on Monday, we discussed the handbook changes that the board previously rescinded and determined that we didn't need to make any further changes on those for the rest of the school year, but there are some things that I think that we're going to continue to discuss, and those, as requested by the board, will be brought to the Personnel Committee first before there's any changes made. So it's kind of going to be an ongoing process throughout the year, so.
Susan? So Eric, did you discuss the handbook changes that had come to the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep,
And
we discussed,
what kind of the general feeling was?
we discussed the COVID leave, we discussed section 19, the renewal for performance, and section 21, the normal hours of work, so. And the general consensus of the Personnel Committee and administration was that there was not going to be any further changes for the remainder of the school year.
Okay, so those changes have effectively been rescinded?
Yes.
Okay.
And there won't be any changes for this school year, but there are things that we all agreed that could be discussed and potentially refined and maybe improved upon, but those will go through the process now of coming to the Personnel Committee in the future, so. So everything is back to the same way that it was.
Okay,
The only difference is the COVID leave. That is still in place, so that's still in place as in there is no COVID-19 leave as previously was before, and the main reason for that is that leave was being funded through federal funding, which is no longer there, so. But there still is, they still have the personal leave days that they can use, so.
So where's COVID? It's stable.
I don't know where it is, not in here, I hope.
Well, you never know.
Been going around.
Yeah.
You won't know until somebody's coughing in the back.
It's the section 8.05 COVID-19 leave in the teacher handbook remains as it's been strucken from the handbook as there is no more leave specific to COVID.
That's because it expired because of the date.
Right.
Not because it had been removed from the handbook in any way, right? Right. And did you discuss whether or not you wanted to reinstate any COVID language at all?
We discussed it quite a bit as far as reinstating language, but also just getting a better understanding from administration and HR of the leave that's already in place and what the situation would be if somebody, was to get COVID and they had to be off for 5 days or 10 days. But one of the things I think that's important to understand is the restrictions of an employee, let's say, that gets sick or has COVID, it's up to the employee to let us know. There's no, we don't track or follow or keep track of days that they've been infected, days they're in quarantine or anything. That doesn't exist anymore. So it's really up to the employee to let administration know, their administrator know if they have COVID or if they're just sick. Either way, and then take the appropriate caution and leave time that's available. So I did ask the question if that one had COVID and they had to be gone for an extended period of time, what would happen? And I think we talked about FMLA possibly being applied at that point, so. Is that right, Dan? Did I get everything pretty much?
Yep.
That would be,
And we're meeting on the 16th, Peter, yeah.
So Eric, what was the MGA position on the COVID?
Well, I think MGEA, they were not at this meeting. They knew that they were not planned to be at this meeting because we wanted to discuss it first. I did talk to Mandy about that, and I think that is still, a concern for everybody that they want something in place. It's expired, so we would have to have that discussion, I guess, if that was something that was going to be put back into place in some capacity. But I will say, I think, just personally, we have to get to a point where we're moving on. I mean, one of the things I brought up in the personnel committee is it's not just COVID-19 we should be concerned about, it's influenza as too, or any, for that matter, any communicable disease that's happening, RSV or any of those are all concerns that everybody should have. So it's not just, you don't just want someone to come to work if they have COVID-19. You don't want them to come to work if they have anything that can be contagious. So I think, I trust our staff is, making the best decisions for students, and I trust our students making the best decisions and families making the best decisions for them. And I think we can do the best we can. Personally, I think 10 days, there's some discussion, is 10 days enough? I think it could be more. I think the administration thinks it's enough. I think that could be a discussion in the future that we have, whether that number is increased or not for the amount of personal leave. But right now, it's at 10, correct? Or 11?
11.
It's at 11. So it's at 11. That's very comparable with other districts in Dane County. It's actually more than some districts. So it's a, it's hard to say it's enough, but
I was gonna say, like, it's a hard question to get good data around, because if you have a finite number of days, the chance that you're gonna take more than that, right? It's not like you can look and see, okay, how many days are people taking and look at an average, because most people probably aren't gonna opt to take unpaid time. So it's just a hard data point to
sure it is,
get
yeah.
around. But I agree with you. It feels, yeah.
I mean, that also accrues, correct, Dan? So like if one year they have 10 and they use 5, 6 are carried on to the next year. So, it's possible. Where I think the other, we can get into leave also, but and this also came up is, I think you brought up, Peter, I'm not sure who did, but I think with women, they have to take paternity leave. It really is an equitable thing, because that becomes, if they have to take paternity leave and use their leave, then they don't have as much leave as somebody else would. So,
Yeah. I assume, well, that would be a question for Nicole, I guess. I assume most of those folks are under FMLA.
no, I don't,
You think they're doing a combination of?
I mean, I don't
Because
know.
it's- because it's-
I'm just saying that it came up, so.
Oh, fair.
We're meeting again on the 16th. That meeting on the 16th is specifically to discuss the proposals that we made. The handbook discussion is not happening on the 16th. That will be something that will probably come up throughout the year. We'll discuss some of those things, but I'll keep the board informed of what that is.
Thank you, Eric. Moving on to possible action items. First is the Monona Grove High School French Club trip to France in June 2024.
Okay, so I think Joe teed this up great earlier about all the activities we have with us. Leah Spey, representing the French Club, and Leah, I've shared with the board the link that you gave us, a little bit about that, but just as a reminder, per board policy, the board has to approve any international trips, and so Leah will be glad to tell you a little bit about the trip and answer any questions for you.
Hi, for those of you who are newer members, like Dan said, we typically take a trip abroad every 3 years. Of course, that was interrupted by COVID. So our last trip was in 2018. We did not take a trip then in 21. So we've proposed the trip. I am usually the person who chaperones that trip. And so this go around, I typically have used the same nonprofit student travel company for the last couple of trips, but this time I just thought, since COVID, I just thought maybe we'll just do a whole new research. So last spring, I spent quite a bit of time like looking into different nonprofits to see what they were offering in terms of duration. Had a couple of meetings with kids who were interested in the trip to find out like what would be on their bucket list, and then looking at the different companies and what they had to offer. And so what we decided on was to go with a trip offered by Experitas. So you can see, this is just kind of an at a glance about this trip. And so it'll be next June that we'll leave. It's a 15-day trip. It's a combination, students wanted a combination of, they wanted to see kind of the proverbial Parisian sites, but they said they'd also want to visit some areas outside of Paris. And then they also said that they would rather have a homestay than not have a homestay, which I was really happy about. So this is the itinerary. You can see kind of the blow by blow, what will kind of happen over the course of those 15 days. These are really nice sites. I guess another thing that influenced me picking this trip was that I have a good friend of mine. She's a longtime French teacher in Janesville, and she's been traveling with Experitas probably the last 10 years, and she's really, really had nothing but high praise for the trip. As of now, we have 10 kids signed up, so, and we've already done a little bit of fundraising. And let's see, what else can I tell you about it? That's, I mean, you can just see from here, you know, where we're gonna be, the breakdown, and then the family state. Students right now are in the process of, Experitas does a really good job of soliciting like information and forms and things like that from the kids through a portal. So kids right now are in the process of writing, they basically write like a letter to their potential French host family. So they're working on that now. That'll be due in November, as well as getting their stuff in for their passports, which if anybody's got a passport recently can sometimes take a while. Yeah, so of course, as usual, I think a common question is, you know, how can we make these trips accessible from a financial standpoint? Because obviously, anytime you're taking a flight over to Europe, that adds a huge cost just in the airfare. But we've already done some fundraising through concessions that Joe was talking about at school games. We are also within our French club planning on some different fundraisers to do this year that we will kind of reserve a little bit, maybe for just the kids who are going on the trip this year, so that they can really be the focus and the breadwinners of that fundraiser. A couple things that we do ongoing is we have crepe sales at school. So we do like an afternoon, right after school, we just set up a little crepe table and kids bring in, they donate all the ingredients. I donate the batter. I bring in crepes that are already pre-made because we found out that kids want a crepe a go-go. Like they want it and they want it before they can catch their bus. But we do have some different fundraisers. We also have a relationship with a woman here in Madison who actually makes authentic crepes at different festivals. And she just recently told me that she is wanting to sit down with us to carve out a date or maybe more where she can donate her time, her ingredients, and come and make the crepes at school for an extra special crepe sale. So there will be opportunities for kids to make some money for their trip yet this year, so.
I have a question. So is it only for students that are in the French club? Can students outside of the club participate in
Yeah,
this?
that's a good question. Per our student handbook, the trips that go abroad, like Spanish students, they also take trips abroad. We generally have the requirement that we want kids to have taken through level 3 of the language. There's a lot of reasons for that. We want kids to feel confident enough that they can really capitalize on those linguistic opportunities by having some base skills. There could be, you know, potential of, we want kids to have enough language skills to be, to a certain degree, independent enough, and maybe even from a safety standpoint. So for that reason, yes, we want kids, we offer the trip to kids who are currently enrolled in a class and who have finished through their 3rd year by the end of the year right before the trip. So, yeah.
Have you gone to the Monona Education Foundation in terms of funding?
No, I should. I really should, yes.
I was looking at Christian, because he would have,
know,
yeah, again, if you were there, you would have thought about that right away, because I know, you know, we're looking back in the late 90s, the kids were going then. And Even when they used to take the trip to Washington DC, without a scholarship, we lost students. So, you know, we did major fundraising to try and help. I noticed that they do list some written scholarships, but, you know, if we could, other than the foundation, there should be some other ways we can help.
Actually, I forgot to mention, so, another project that we have in French Club, because we are trying to, I guess, underscore, I think, a goal of all of our extracurriculars at the high school at least, is to, how can we, through our club goals and anywhere through our club activities, is there a way that we can instill in kids a sense of community service? So one of our projects this year for our club is to inaugurate, however you want to put it, a memorial scholarship that would be put toward travel costs. So we're hoping to get that going this fall, and I don't know, I've never done one of these before to get it, approved. So it would be great if we could even maybe offer one of the students going on the trip, maybe a small stipend, travel stipend, yeah.
One thing we should do is go back and look at the students who have gone, who are now out working.
Right.
Working very successfully. I know when several of the students went to Lawrence University who had gone on a French trip, they're required to take one semester of French. It was waived because their knowledge base was strong. And they attributed a large part of that to that experience. And they did the same within the home for a period of time. So again, I think it's wonderful. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's fun though. It's super gratifying, I think, as a teacher and as a parent. And it's just super gratifying, so.
Yeah, obviously, I totally support this, and I wanted to thank you for going the effort to do this. One question about how many students do you anticipate participating?
Well, right now there are 10 signed up. We actually, so a lot of these student travel companies, they offer some more incentives if you get going on your registration really early. So this one in particular offered, I think, a $200 discount if you had kids register by, or create a group. That means just get any number of kids under your school's name registered by the end of the school year, full school year before you travel. So we took advantage of that. So that was nice. We did have quite a number of kids who were able to register early and take advantage of that discount. But as of right now, we have 10 kids. So.
But how many do you anticipate, do you think?
Well, it closes, the registration closes, because again, it takes a long time to prepare for these trips and the international flights that we have to reserve. So they have until the 15th, so, yeah. So I anticipate there probably being 10, maybe a few more. Yeah.
Philip and then Krishna.
I'm just curious, what percentage of the students that you anticipate going are going to be returning next fall as students at the high school versus graduating?
Yeah.
Where they can share their experience with students that weren't able to go yet, that hadn't accomplished enough French or whatever held them back.
That's a really good question. So of those 10 kids, because there's just 10, I could say, a couple of them are seniors. It's really actually a big spread. So again, they have to finish through third year. Typically students, when they come into the high school, the majority of kids who are taking either French or Spanish are enrolled in level 2. They've generally taken level 1 at GDS. So level 3, they can complete at the if they come in as a freshman in level 2, they will have completed level 3 by the end of their sophomore year. So that said, I would say there's probably a few more sophomores than there are. No, it's kind of equal. I would say that there's an equal number of sophomores, juniors, and then a handful of seniors that are signed up. So I would say it's about 30-some% each.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I was
that's
hoping
a
to hear
good
that a bunch
question.
of kids were going to come back next year with fun stories to share with.
Yeah, and that is, like, that whole messaging piece that you were talking about earlier, is really powerful with kids. We do that in other ways in the club too. We offer kids an opportunity to host a student from France in January for 3 weeks through a really nice program that we've also traveled with. And so I asked one of the students, she's in my French 4 class this year. She hosted a student over the summer, and so she's going to actually be one of our guest speakers for one of our French club activities after school, and she's going to talk about hosting the student, Eva. Yeah.
Sounds like a great trip, and yeah, kudos on all the work you've done to set it up.
Madame, je suis très contente de vous voir ici ce soir. I hope I got that right. Anyway, I will just say, in Madame's favor, I have been a pupil for over 3 years now, so I will say that as far as this trip goes and as far as French Club and, of course, her class stands, I think that it is a tremendous opportunity for students to experience not only learning another language, but also just how differently the world can be from, across the pond. So I will say that I truly support this, and I do hope the board approves it. And I will go further to say that I think it is one of the opportunities that is most integral to Monona Grove's idea of opportunity. Its culture of allowing students to take on risks and allowing them to grow. And so to that end, I'm really glad that you're here, and I really look forward to seeing you in class tomorrow. I should be able to attend French Club. I think my schedule is clear. But anyways, merci beaucoup, madame.
I did already correct your quiz, by the way.
Yeah, I saw it in my seat. I got to get that grade somehow.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, this itinerary looks incredible. I love the homestay component of it. I think that that's so cool, and I love that the kids that are going or really wanted to do that. I think that that's so neat. And I will say, just on a personal note, I had the great privilege back when I was in high school to take our French Club French trip, and it really is. It's remarkable. So happy to move approval of the Monona Grove High School French Club trip to France in June 2024.
Chaperones, are there chaperones, kind of supervision of the trip?
No,
How?
we were just thinking we were just kind of. I'm going to be chaperoning, and I think our ratio for the district for this type of trip is 8-1. So now that we have 10 students, I think we do have to have another chaperone. So we will find out who the second chaperone is. It's generally somebody who's approved within administration. So, but I am going to be one of the chaperones.
And another question just about the funding. Has there been anybody that hasn't been able to go because of funding, either now or in the past?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily know, but we always advertise to kids, that these companies, they almost always offer scholarships that students can apply for. So just to give you an example, I try to stress to the kids, if you really want to go on this trip, we will offer, any type of fundraiser that you want to do, I will back it as much as I can. And to the tune of one year, we did a Kringles sale, and I had a student who she netted $700 from one, and that was 15 years ago. It was one of my first years here. And so, yeah, that's a lot of Kringles, especially when they deliver them into your classroom all along one wall.
Oh my
It was
God.
really interesting. But yes, it is a huge cost. Again, the majority of it is the fact that we're going to Europe, so the international flight,
Yeah.
is a big chunk of it. I always propose to the kids also, I always propose a trip to Quebec as an alternative, because those trips generally are a little bit less expensive. But again, I'm not the traveler, and I'm not the family of those students, that I want them to be vested. So I feel like I need to put it out there to students, and the majority of them want to go to France, is what they vote for. And But I guess I don't know.
I think I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't somebody that maybe, from economic standpoint that wanted to go and was in the club and that couldn't go, because they didn't have enough.
Can I can't honestly answer. Yeah, I can't honestly answer. All we can, I try to offer that, there are fundraising opportunities available. And that the company also does a pretty drawn out payment schedule as well. But you're right. I mean, it's still a huge chunk of money. I agree. Yeah, that.
Thanks.
Sorry, that's.
No,
still my answer.
that's
I
all,
wish I could-
that's, that's great, thanks.
Aye.
Great presentation. All right, next is the 2023-2024 revised extracurricular additive schedule.
Okay, so there are a couple attachments with requests. This is for middle school activities. I think the requests outline the rationale pretty well. So the first one is for a yearbook advisor. It's currently not a paid position, and I think Chris in her explanation, explained why we would like to now do that. And so that's one we fully support, and the rationale for the dollar amount is comparable to some of the other advisorships. And then the second one is an adjustment to a activity we already have. We have cross-country at the middle school, and again, as outlined in this, not sure why in the past that's been lesser compensation than the other sports. They're very comparable amount, the time commitment, for the coach there, and so pleased that they brought forth this recommendation to, make that pay more equitable with the other coaches. So we support or recommend, both of those revisions.
I move approval of the 2023-2024 revised extracurricular additive schedule as presented.
Any further discussion?
I have a quick question. Is this the first time then that we have not had the boys and girls separated on the schedule? Did they used to be separated?
I think on this, I don't know, I don't think there was a recent change. If they
Okay.
were in the past, I'm not sure.
All right, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good thing, so, yeah. Aye.
Moving on to CTE coordinator contract.
Just as a reminder, this is a separate agenda item as opposed to being part of the consent agenda because this coordinator position does have an individual contract that is different than a teacher contract. And so we're pleased to have the position filled here into the school year.
A motion, please.
I move approval of the CTE coordinator contract as presented.
Second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right. Next is the 4K2 grade configuration for Cottage Grove School and Taylor Prairies.
Yeah, just start by just reminding everyone else in your summary, but you recall at the last meeting, there was a motion to postpone. So the main motion that was on the floor at that point is still on the floor, at this point for your consideration. As far as additional information for the board, as noted on the summary, the slides that were presented last time, there were a handful that were updated primarily with the communication piece as far as what's been done in this last month. So in your discussion, if you have any questions, myself or our team would be glad to answer any questions.
I can start with questions. So boundaries, can you kind of elaborate? I guess, I don't know, at this point, can you share a little bit about boundaries to ensure that it's equitable?
Yep, great question. So we've talked right from the get-go that would be kind of the phase two if this were approved. But I think it's fair to understand how that process might look and how can we ensure that we're going to have equitable equity between the two schools. And so I have done some preliminary work on that. So at this point, Tish runs for me regular attendance reports, and we can run those reports by addresses. We can include student, demographics in there as well. And so in looking just at our spreadsheets and sorting by address and neighborhood, looking at a map to have an idea, where our students are located as far as their residence is something that we've always looked at along the way, but obviously we need to look at much more intensely. So one of the things that will help us in that process is there is software that we have. It's just an additional add-on that will allow us to do the actual mapping, where we can actually take our students where they're located and draw potential boundaries and run the report. It'll tell us exactly what the breakdown is of the students in each of those areas. And so there are a number of other school districts that have used that product in their work, and we'll collaborate with them. I've already reached out to the La Crosse School District, who recently went through that process. But specifically to answer the question, how confident are we that we can make sure that we do have equitable distribution? And I can say honestly, I'm very confident. With a community and only having 2 attendance boundaries is much less complicated than if we're in a community, say with 5 elementary schools and having to try to have equitable distribution in that many of them. With just 2, we can, I think, easily draw boundary lines to make sure that that happens. Also take into consideration future growth. We know exactly where all the subdivisions are currently planned, and to go into that. The other important piece that will allow us to do that is for 4K2, there are not that many students that are not eligible for bus transportation, and so given that the proximity of the 2 schools are so close to one another, we can, because students are transported, really draw those lines where we need to. And you might think, well, this neighborhood is slightly closer to the one elementary school. Well, it might be a minute or 2 longer bus ride, and so I think that gives us that flexibility as well to allow us to draw lines where we need to. So that's something I feel really confident that we'll be able to do. I will tell you, this will be a board decision on how we go about it, but I will be proposing that we do create an ad hoc committee to include staff, parents, community members in that process. To make sure, we've talked about the idea of transparency, right? And to make sure as a communication tool as much as anything else. So,
I guess my second question then in regards to that is, are there any safeguards in place? So after this, future boards or future superintendents, what safeguards are in place to ensure that it remains equitable?
yeah, great question. So this board, I think, has been very clear, right, about the expectations. And really, then, to me, that would come down to a policy. I think it would make perfect sense for this board to adopt a policy to say, here are the criteria we'll use for adopting attendance boundaries. And that will memorialize it in policy. Not that future boards couldn't change it, but by putting it in policy, it's pretty powerful and gives us that guidance to work under. So I think it's a great idea to consider a policy on it.
Elizabeth,
Just really quick I appreciate that on the policy note. For you, Susan, I think as chair of policy, maybe something, if this ends up
Set
going
criteria.
through, then we can put it on a future policy agenda and start thinking about what that policy may look like as
think
part
that-
of our phase 2 planning there.
I think that's a great idea, right? I think that
Great.
would be a really good discussion and would be helpful in the process that you're utilizing to do that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question too, Lauren, because I feel like the purpose of presenting this plan is to enhance the student experience, right, and make it better. And clearly, if we have like unequitable school distribution, that's harmful. It's harmful to everybody. And so that I appreciate the question and the kind of the guarantees that we can put in place as we move forward.
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 questions. One, I think, kind of dovetails off of what Lorene was asking, but more specifically, with the 2 schools, do we have any consideration right now or plans to make the schools as equivalent as possible? So that even if we draw equitable boundaries, from a community perspective, there's not, a sense that this one's newer, or this one's got better facilities, or this one was kind of left in the dust, relative to a different school. Can you talk a little bit about the plans for facility upgrades for, one school versus the other, and why? And
Yep, great question. I actually got this question from a community member recently, and my response is, well, we need to do a walk through the schools because we did major renovations to Cottage Grove School with the last facilities referendum. And so, no, there'd be no plans for doing anything to either school. They are very equitable right now as they stand. Taylor Prairie was built as a K-2 school, and so returning to that just aligns perfectly. Now, things are a little bit different because there wasn't 4K at the time when the building was built, but Emily's got a great plan about where those classrooms would be, and so that would accommodate our students really well. Cottage Grove School over the years has had a number of different configurations, but the last renovation, if you recall, one of the things that we talked about, like with Granite Ridge even, was having that flexibility. What we need right now educationally today might look different 10, 20 years from now. So they have those flexible spaces. Well, that was also part of the thought when we did the renovations at Cottage Grove School. And so there are a number of classrooms that have been updated. And I would say that we have very comparable learning spaces in both buildings.
Follow-up to that is, do you view the change to neighborhood schools as having any impact on the long-term usability of these schools, right? In terms of growing out of them as a district, needing a third school, et cetera, versus if we didn't change anything?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate in that the capacity of both schools is very similar. Cottage Grove School has slightly larger capacity, but it would not change those long-term projections. So when Granite Ridge was built, the idea was that when that reaches capacity, Taylor Prairie and Cottage Grove School, all three would hit at the same time. So then whenever that is, how many years down the road, when it comes time for expansion, they'd all be at that point at the same time. So this doesn't change that.
Okay.
The other thing that we have going for us that we're very fortunate is because we do have a fair number of open enrollment students. And so we can place those students at whichever school we need to equalize class sizes.
And then my last question is, can you just paint a bit of a picture of, the kind of support coming from staff, administration, teachers, at each of these schools for this change? Is it broad support? Is it 50-50? Can you sort of just characterize the feedback you've gotten from administration and staff? And then if there are notable concerns from staff, can you address those and how we might respond to those?
Okay, what we've gotten up to this point, you're saying as far as?
Yeah, what's our,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that we talk to, administration, principals,
Yeah.
associate principals, and teachers. I'm curious to know, are they fully behind this, ooh-rah-rah, or is this
Yeah.
kind of a 50-50 or?
Sure, absolutely. So I certainly have had, a couple of meetings with the staff. I'm going to defer to Emily, who has, if you don't mind, who has, have had many conversations, perhaps Krista as well, directly with the staff to talk a little bit about that.
I think overwhelmingly staff are supportive of the 4K2 model and think that it is what is best for children. And they have, when I became principal at Taylor Prairie, that's what I was hearing right out of the gate. And then, coming down to an actual decision, there were some nerves about what will that look like for me in my position. But for kids and for our system as a whole, I do believe, and Jesse too, I've had conversations with him, our staff feel like the 4K2 is what's best for children, best for learning.
And for them. I mean,
For them.
I feel like from a perspective of of being a teacher and doing as good of a job as possible as a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think like Dan said, when we have an ad hoc committee and can review like what will the process be like and how can we make sure it's fair and that their voice is involved and so maybe it means something like, do you have a building preference? Do you have a grade preference? Just getting their voice included in the decision-making process about which building will be important. But for them, splitting up a team is difficult, but at the same time, a lot of our teams are somewhat split anyway in terms of planning. So, there's benefits too, because then they'll get to collaborate with other grade levels, which can lead to some really awesome things. They can see what's happening when the children haven't arrived at their grade yet, and what's happening afterwards to inform their decision-making and planning, so.
Okay.
That collaboration is huge and very beneficial.
Yeah, and I'm asking really for two reasons. One, just to try and judge this decision, but also, teacher shortages being what they are and retention being what it is. Do we have any concern that this would disrupt that in some way where, we would turn a certain degree of staff off and, find ourselves in a pickle that way?
Yeah, I can speak just through all the conversations we've had. I definitively say no. as long as Emily said, in the next phase, okay, we really are including, our staff in that conversation. But as far as the actual model itself, no concern.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Elizabeth?
I just want to give a clarification on the facilities upgrades because we did talk about this last time. I don't want it to come back around and then have a conversation maybe around like, oh, I thought we were doing facilities upgrades. So we did talk about Cottage Grove School playground specifically needing upgrades, but the primary driver for that is like accessibility and compliance issues. So that would have to get upgraded regardless of what we did. Okay. But just as a reminder, because that will be a facilities upgrade that will be different between the buildings.
Thank you so much. Of course, my questions and comments from the meeting prior still stand. What I wanted to ask is, do you anticipate any downstream effects on the high school's role and culture within the district or any other existing schools as a result of this change?
I don't think so. I think the one thing that we have existing, right, is we look for opportunities for high school students to, spend time and as mentors and so on in our, lower grades. And so I don't think it has any impact on that at all as to, what we have in place right now. So, I honestly don't think it would have any real impact.
Thanks.
Just for clarity, I think we should restate the motion.
So, and many of these have already been answered, and some of these are from the community, and so I'm asking them out loud, so that anybody that's listening to the board meeting can just reaffirm that this has been studied by the committee and by administration. One of the first questions I had was, basically, again, I really appreciate the update and the PowerPoint. It made a big difference to me in the way I've been able to respond to the community because you added some really good, solid information. So I really appreciate that. And then I just printed out those pages and just started handing them out. But we just got them. So again, I encourage people to really look at that. One of the questions I got, and I think you've answered it, but they specifically said, have you identified any negatives in the student experience by going to the 4K2? I think they were speaking particularly about their own children who are currently in the 4K1, 4K and 1-3. I didn't see any.
Yeah, I think the short answer is no, we have not.
That's kind of what I thought, but I wanted them to be able to hear that from you. And then there was also a question, and I think Emily has answered that, but there's some concerns about the co-planning ability among the grades, and I think Emily already said we already have some issues with that, and we just keep working through them as best we can. I mean, I remember very vividly when the kids were in the middle school, 6-8 at Winnequa, there were basically at least two and maybe more teams of 3, and the kids would be divided up into those groups. And, some people didn't like that because you had no, it's like the teacher that's assigned. And I think Emily's kind of already addressed that. The other question they asked about was the specialists, particular specialists.
Susan, I'm going to just interject. I think Emily wanted to say.
Oh, yes, sorry.
There aren't issues with the co-planning. It's just that having 8 kindergarten teachers, they already co-plan in teams of 4.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't change. So that's all good. And 4K team, they'd be split. They're a smaller team, but they get the monthly Mondays where they collaborate. So I think that's great that those Mondays are already built into our structure where like Winnequa 4K teachers come together with Cottage Grove teachers. So that would all remain in place as well. So just clarifying, there weren't issues. It's just.
I hope the community heard that. Would you say that last line one more time about the teachers coming together?
Well, for 4K, they already come together each month on Mondays and get together as Winnequa and Cottage Grove teachers, so that would remain in place. And then for kindergarten, they're already planning in a split kind of way, so 4 and 4, so that would be the same no matter which building they were at.
I think it's great to hear that from administration, to be able to hear that piece. Thank you for adding that piece. Yeah, I didn't mean, I think what I was hearing was, if there were, you had already kind of worked through those. You'd been able to identify those, had been able to do that. And then, again, the specialist relationships, I think people were concerned that, we already are moving teachers between schools, particularly specialists, no matter what that area may be. And it sounded to me like in the PowerPoint that you would address that issue. Do you want to?
Yeah, so right now, it never works out exactly even when you look at positions like music, art, Phi-Ed, as far as the exact number of FTE you need. It's based on how many sections that you have. And, so rarely does it come out perfect that you need exactly. So we already have flexibility built in. If we have a need, say for the FTE comes out to like a 0.9, oftentimes we will offer a full-time contract and then have that person help with some supervision in the off time. And it really helps us, gives us a lot of flexibility. So that stuff is already built in. So with a new configuration, yeah, those FTEs would change slightly, but they're always going to continue to vary year by year depending on, the number of students. And so we work really hard to provide that flexibility. And it will likely mean that we have some part-time positions as we do now. And then sometimes it makes sense to, round those up to full-time depending on how that works. So the process would be the same as it is now.
And you've already worked through addressing those kinds of issues, so you're prepared to handle those.
Yeah, we haven't addressed exactly what that will be at that point, but the process will be, coming up with those plans and having that communication with teachers, before and during final decisions.
Well, and I hate to ask you to reiterate this again, but one of the questions I continue to get is the cost. And they were specifically looking at the facility things. And I think one of the comments that they had heard was that it was basically libraries. The library was going to have to be an issue. But in the PowerPoint, I think you're going to evaluate a bathroom adjustment, the kitchen cafeteria, the playground, and then the library.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the costs are negligible. It really is not a factor. Winnequa has adjusted to add, 4K to the building, 5K. We haven't adjusted sink heights or anything like that. If need be, we use little step stools. And so that's typical in an elementary building. In a typical K-5 building, you have a wide range of learners that way. So when it comes to, we're confident with the physical building, other than, what Elizabeth mentioned with the playground, no changes. When it comes to instructional materials, the library is the one place that we're not going to just take the books and, shuffle them around. We'll want to buy more, but that's something that, especially in talking to one of our library media specialists, that we're doing this over 2 years, that'll be a great opportunity to start adjusting those collections. And we do have significant library funds already in place, and so if we have to add a little bit more, we'll work it into our regular budget.
Well, and then would you just, again, I think you were talking about it before, but I think the community hasn't heard that as clearly as you were saying to us tonight. But I think they continue to suggest, and we could see in the updated PowerPoint and the website, offered opportunities for feedback. But you were also alluding to, again, your continuing thoughts about feedback from staff and families. And you were talking about a committee, kind of like your strategic planning committee, in terms of composition.
Yeah, so I was specifically talking about the attendance boundaries. I think in developing that, my recommendation would be that we develop a committee to bring forth a recommendation to the board for that, because I just think having people involved and to help understand that process, I could sit down and probably do it myself, but not doing it in a collaborative way, I think to involve trust and transparency, we need to have people, involved. So that's one specific way of actively involving. In all the other things, I think it might range depending on what the piece is that we're doing, but that open, transparent communication about and informing is important as well.
Philip?
Yeah, just one more thing that I'm hoping you can comment on. A couple people that I talked to had questions that I didn't think I could adequately answer related to going from, all the second graders having a single sort of culture in school and principal to now having, two, and what would that look like? Would there be consistency, right? So that as the two different cohorts of second graders move into the next school, they're coming from similar places and that sort of thing. I was just wondering if you or Emily could comment on how that might work, going from a sort of unified situation today at each grade level to now having two different principals running two different schools and how that collaboration and consistency might be achieved.
Well, I'll let Emily speak to it, but I'll say it already exists with Granite Ridge and Winnequa. We have, two different schools and experiences that come together in the middle school. It's interesting, when, how we define equitable experiences. Of course, they're not going to be identical in those schools. They each have their own culture, but absolutely, that's something that, the expectation is that they're excellent experiences in both, even if they're slightly different. But I don't know if our team has anything to add to that.
I've had lots of conversations with Jesse and Reed and Angie. We chat daily. So I think it's just gonna get better and better in that way, and communication-wise. Like, for example, just a small example, but homecoming week, all three elementaries in CG decided these are the dress-up days just to make it easy for parents.
Amazing. Thank you.
It's just one way, but we hope to do more and more of that.
Is it possible that there's even an upside? That occurred to me, but again, I'm not an educator, so I have the idea that you've got two different schools experiencing issues, learning from issues, right, and then coming back and forth to each other with solutions. Is that a possibility too? That instead of having a narrower single view on how to solve things,
Yeah, and so like I do that with Angie because she's got kindergarten at Winnequa. So
right?
we talk that way, our closest talk to each other.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I just wanted to get that out too, because I want people to hear that, because that's something that I'd heard talking to a few different people.
And we just happen to be a unique position, but I think is a real positive in looking at, as Emily and Jesse as our principals, who both spent time at Winnequa. I mean, I think it's huge to have an understanding, and not, again, that things have to be done in an identical way. And I think there's things that you guys do that might be unique that you share with Winnequa as well. But I think that's huge. And that's been something that we've talked about in previous years we need to do a better job of. And I think we're in a really good place right now.
That's all that I have.
All right. Sophia made a great suggestion of restating the motion.
Original motion, I think I made the original motion, which was the approval to implement a 4K2 grade configuration for both Cottage Grove School and Taylor Prairie School at the beginning of the 2025-2026 school year as presented.
Although we need it because it's already on the, we just got to call the
Stated.
question and vote.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried.
Next is
Your little face.
discussion items. Next are future meeting dates. So they're listed in board.
Yeah, I just want to point out, just as a reminder, we do have a couple special meetings this month. So the board workshop is next week, Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We'll have our partners from McKinstry helping facilitate that conversation to talk about our projects that are in place and long-term planning. And then we do have a special board meeting also the following Wednesday on the 25th. I'll be, fairly short, but we need to adopt the budget and tax levy. As a reminder, the last piece, the state equalization aid, comes out on the 15th. And then we can actually have the, actual budget, approval. So.
Lorene, I emailed you and Dan, I won't be at those two meetings, I'll be in Colorado for the 18th and 25th, so. I think you'll have 4 people to approve it.
All right, can I have a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn?
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.
Good job, everyone. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, I can't emphasize
It's
enough.
9 o'clock.
Coordinated spirit days.
A good job would be 7:45.
Well, we'll do better next time.